Hello guys, welcome to all of you in the Data Mindset. My name is Amit and I'm your host for this session. I think in a previous class we discussed about Python operators and we talked about some of the concepts related to these topics. We have seen that is which are the operators available in the Pythons. We saw that some examples related to it. I hope you have enjoyed these topics. In case you have any doubt, any challenges related to that topics, feel free to connect me over here or maybe on the WhatsApp channels. I will try to respond it. So without wasting much time, let's go and start it. And today the agenda will be of this topic. Today agenda of this class will be like we will understand a new topic which is very important and it's a very interesting to learn and easy to learn it. So the topic is taking user input and type conversion. I believe that most of the people they have some questions related to this topic. Though the topic is very easy, but I believe that they have some interesting questions to ask. But of course, going forward in this topic, I will first discuss about what this topic all about it, what are the challenges inside these topics, and of course we will talk about those challenges in terms of by using examples, in terms of about the literature point of view and so on. So without wasting much time, let's go and start it. Okay, so the topic is, let me add some more cells over here. Okay, so I'm just putting the heading taking user inputs and type conversion. Okay, so what is meaning of taking user input? So let's say so far whatever the programming we have done, we have always provided the values or data, or maybe you can say we have supplied those things by manually. Okay, so we have given the our input at this moment when we created the variables. So that means whatever we have done it is was supplied through the manualists. But right now the topic what we are going to discuss is, in through this topic we will learn that how we will take a external values in our programming, how we will take as a external variable into our programmings, and those values can be usable into the logic of the program. Okay, so let's say if I give you one example, for example you have a calculator. So calculator, if I use the calculator, let's say I wanted to use a calculator, so maybe I will use 10 plus 5, and the same calculator, let's say if you given to you, maybe you use 20 plus 10. So that means the calculator doesn't know what the input will become. Okay, but it can able to accept any possible inputs whatever that supplies to it, and it does perform the particular operations. Okay, so we do not know which kind of the input will be come into the programming, but we should able to accept those inputs and we should able to capture the operations of those inputs. Alright, so let's say as the topic suggested, taking user input. So here one very interesting functions is available inside the Python, which is input function. So let's say what it does. If I write input, okay, and after that just putting the parenthesis, and inside the parenthesis let's say I just put it enter your name. Okay, I have taken one function which is an input function, and after that I just put it a text which is nothing but enter your name, and I just close this parenthesis. And if I execute this piece of the code, let's see what will happen. Alright, so let's say I execute this piece of the code. You can see that is here the text inside the input functions came to the outside, and after that one horizontal box comes in front of you, and inside the horizontal box you need to supply your values. So let's say I just supply, for example, my name is Amit, and I just press enter, and look at here what happens. So whatever the value I supplied over here, it is able to print the value over here Amit. Though we have not written any print statement, but input functions is taking the values and showing that is the value what we have supplied over here. Okay, it's a very easy, guys. It's a very interesting and very easy. So look at here what we did, a very simple steps, just taking input functions. We provided what we want to take as a input, and then we execute this. Okay, we execute this line of the code. Let's say we wanted to do the same thing again. So for example, this time I'm creating a variable called a, and I'm putting the value, I'm putting the function input, and now I'm just writing it again, enter your name. Okay, and now I execute this code again, and this time again I'm supplying the values Amit. Okay, but why it is not able to print Amit again? Do you have any idea? Okay, so look at here. Here the value has been supplied to a. Okay, the value, whatever the value we have given in the input, it has supplied to a, but we have not called a again, right? We have not called a again. So let's say I call the a again. So here what I'm doing is I am printing the a, and look at here, it is giving us output as Amit. All right. So it's a very simple, like, whatever the inputs you are supplying, whatever the value you are supplying to the input functions, it is getting stored in a variable called a. Let's say my variable is a, and if you call this variable, it will give you what you have supplied to it, right? So now let's do one very interesting task. At this moment, what we want to do, we wanted to take a input, and we wanted to do this some kind of the operations. For example, let's say we wanted to take two numbers, okay, a and b, and we wanted to add those numbers and get the output as a plus b. All right, and for that simply we are going to write some piece of the code. Let's say again I'm writing a1, and here I'm going to write input, and I'm writing enter a number. Okay, now again the another variable called b1, and I'm putting input, enter another number. Okay, and finally what I wanted to do, I wanted to get the summation of a1 plus b1. Okay, fine. So let's execute this code. Now I supply the value 10. Okay, and then I enter it. Again I supply the value, let's say 20, and I enter it. So what we are getting? We are getting 1020. I don't think this is the right output, because we have supplied two values 10 and 20, and we wanted to get the summation of these two values. So 10 plus 20 is supposed to get us 30 as output, but what we are getting is 1020, right? So let's do some investigations. What has happened? Why this output has came over here? To understand it very carefully, first we need to understand it, since we have supplied the values 10 over here, but why a1 is considering, does a1 consider 10 as a integer or the string? Because if you know that a1 plus b1, which is 10 and 20 over here, so what it is, the printf statement is doing, print a1 plus b1, it is just putting a1 plus b1 together. So the kind of the output and kind of the operation it is doing is nothing but concatenate, right? So we need to understand that is why it has happened. Since if you look at here, so normally the concatenate operations perform with the strings. So does a1 consider 10 as a string, or b1 consider 20 as a string? So let's do some investigations. So what I'm going to do is I'm trying to print the type of a1, and again I am printing the type of b1, correct? And in both the case we are getting string, right? Since both are string, that's why we are not able to perform the summations or addition operations, because it is considering both input as a string, and it is actually performing the concatenate operations. So now the question is how to solve this problem. First we will solve this problem, and then we will come back again and we will reinvestigate, that is why Python taking user input as a string. Okay, it's a very important questions. Normally it is asking in the interviews process when we are going for the very fresher level roles. So but of course first we will solve these problems, that how to do this. Alright, so here we need to make the understand Python that here we need to make it understand that Python should not consider 10 as a integer, or we can say the A1 should not consider 10 as an integer. So we need to make a type conversions. So here the role is type conversion. Since it is in string state, we need to convert into the integer state. So for that, simply what we need to do is we need to do the simple task. Let's say I just copy this task again and I put it into the another cell. Okay, and I just put it like a simple heading over here, a type conversion. Okay, right. So look at here, what we need to do is, till now this one is string. Okay, from input to this line, like from entire this piece, it is a string. So now what we need to do, in front of that I am just putting integer int. Okay, int is also a function. It takes input and convert into the integer. So entire string I am passing into the int function. Okay, look at here, same I am applying over here, right? Correct. And now this is a string, but in front of that we have also placed integer. So here the string will be converted into the integer. Same goes to over here. Now let me execute this piece of the code, and this time I'm going to supply 10. I'm going to supply 20 for B1 and C. We have got the correct outputs, right? So this is a way you can able to convert your type conversions. So let's say this time wanted to supply, let's say 10.5. Okay, but look at here what has happened. We have got got an error. So error is saying invalid literals for integer with a base 10 because we have supplied 10.5. So since we have done the type conversion as an integer, so it will not accept a float values since we have supplied 10.5 as a float value. So instead of doing it integer, so let me do it one more thing over here. I just copy this code, bring back to here, and in front of it, instead of writing integer, I'm just writing float. Okay, I'm writing float, and now I execute this code again. Okay, and again I'm supplying 10.5, and this time I'm supplying 20. Okay, so now look at here, one value I supply as a float and another value I supply as an integer, and finally we have got the output 30.5, which is nothing but a float. So float type conversions help us to take integer or float altogether. Okay, so the benefit of having float is it can accept integer and it can accept float value both, right? So that's why normally in the programming, if you have a number as input, try to keep as a float, because we do not know that is user can send a float value as well as. Okay, all right. Okay, so I hope you have understand this topic. Okay, the very important part and interesting topic of this interesting discussion of this topic is, like, come back to this slide. Why does input return a string, or you can say why input functions take all inputs or consider all inputs as a string? Okay, right? Of course, see, this is the questions used to ask in an interview. So let me go to the another slide and try to make you understand. So what is happening, like, let's understand the key ideas. So key idea is input always returns a string. Okay, because whatever the value you supply as a input, it will always return as a string. Okay, so let's say if you supply 20, 30, or maybe like, we might have supplied any string values. Okay. Instead of supplying string value, let's say we supply number or maybe pin code, maybe some kind of, ID. So the how Python will understand that is the intent of supplying those input. Okay. It's a very, very difficult to understand the Python to understand the intent of those input. Maybe we have supplied the number, maybe the pin code, maybe it can be related to my ID, maybe it can be related to any kind of the password. So how the Python will decode that is what we are supplying to it is it should be considered as a number, it should be considered as a zip code, it should be considered as a ID. Okay, so it is difficult to understand the intent behind it. Okay, and that's why the Python has, or mostly Python community has decided to keep it, okay, to keep this input as a string only. Okay, so let's say here in this simple case, enter your age, you can say that is whatever the value we supply, it will consider as a string, but since the age cannot be a string, it can be always into the number. Okay, so that's why we have done the some kind of the type conversions. Now the real world analogy that I explained just now, it is difficult to understand the interpretation, that is what is a logic behind it to consider. Okay, to consider that is it is a ID, it is a input or number, it is a number, or it can be considered as whatever the values we are going to supply. So that's why here it is a very interesting point. The answer should be, you should always remember that is, okay, since keyword input sequence of the characters. So keyword input are the input sequence of the characters. So Python has no any intention that is why we are supplying these values or the purpose of supplying these values. So that's why the programmer or the Python community has considered that is whatever the value we are going to supply through our the keyword, we will consider as a string. Okay, we will consider as a string, and later on you can change those strings depend upon the purpose, or the depends upon the solutions you are trying to develop. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to you. So the simple answer is that it is because that Python is unable to understand the user intent through this keyword or keyboard. So that's why the Python community has considered that is whatever the values we are supplying through the input functions, it is considered as a string. Okay, I hope you have understand this topic, and I hope to understand the why part. So please let me know if you have any challenges. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you once again.